Night in the spotlight. Donald Trump prepares to accept the Republican nomination.
I am not in the habit of supporting people who attack my wife and attack my father.
Why Ted Cruz still refuses to endorse his party's nominee. Olympic investigation. How allegations of doping affect one of the world's prominent track teams. And sacrament of matrimony. Pope Francis gives an Italian couple an unforgettable gift. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, July 21st, 2016. Practicing at the podium, Donald Trump preparing to accept the Republican presidential nomination tonight. Good evening from Washington. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick. We have our team coverage from Cleveland. Jason Calvi with reaction from the delegates upset with Ted Cruz for refusing to endorse Trump. But first, political director Lauren Ashburn explains what sparked that controversy. Lauren?
Brian, Donald Trump is just hours from accepting the nomination. I was on the convention floor when he came in for that mic check. He greeted Cleveland and said he was happy to be here. His speech tonight is expected to rock the House, and the campaign hopes it will be devoid of the controversy that has plagued the Trump train this week. In that speech last night, Senator Ted Cruz did not endorse Trump, and one Texas delegate told me that Cruz dug his grave and he crawled in it this morning at a breakfast with all Texas delegates by doubling down.
This is not a game. It is not politics. Right and wrong matters. We have not abandoned who we are in this country.
A defiant Ted Cruz defending his decision not to endorse Donald Trump.
I am not in the habit of supporting people who attack my wife and attack my father.
During last night's speech, Cruz refused to say who he will vote for.
Vote your conscience, vote for candidates up and down the ticket who you trust to defend our freedom.
The convention crowd not happy with the lack of support.
The United States of America.
The Republican nominee upstaged Cruz by appearing in the crowd and giving a thumbs up. Trump later tweeting, "Wow, Ted Cruz got booed off the stage, didn't honor the pledge. I saw his speech 2 hours early, but let him speak anyway. No big deal." Today, Trump's campaign saying Cruz was in the wrong for going back on a promise to support the eventual nominee.
Senator Cruz, the strict constitutionalist, chose not to accept the strict terms of the pledge that he signed. So as far as the contract was concerned, he was the one in violation.
And that pledge was not a blanket commitment that if you go and slander and attack Heidi, that I'm going to nonetheless come like a servile puppy dog and say thank you very much for maligning my wife and maligning my father.
The line with Trump faithful, I say, here about the filibuster king who read Dr. Seuss from the Senate floor is they do not like Ted Cruz. They do not like him, and they won't. Jason Calvi joins us now with more reaction to the Cruz controversy. Jason.
Lauren, some people are speculating that Ted Cruz's 2020 campaign for the White House began with his speech last night. But many of the Texas delegates I've been speaking with today say they're disappointed in their senator.
You lied and said that you were going to support the party nominee, and you won't.
Some Texas delegates expressed their anger.
Senator Cruz created a lot of sympathy for Donald Trump last night because he broke with the unity that was on the floor, and that's why you heard all the boos.
Lewis Murray is a Massachusetts delegate and a Catholic who originally backed Cruz. He says pro-lifers have one choice.
Donald J. Trump is now the standard bearer of the party of life, which is the Republican Party. And either we get behind him or we're going to have Hillary Clinton appoint the next 40 years of Supreme Court and federal judges, and there'll be more abortion in the United States of America.
But other delegates still support Cruz.
What about holding people accountable and being true to yourself? And we wanted someone who would be honest and true to himself, and we saw that today.
This Texas delegate and daughter of EWTN host Johnette Bankovic say unity in the GOP is the goal of this convention.
Delegates overwhelmingly want to leave Cleveland unified.
With Texas delegates critical of Cruz, what does that mean for his Senate run in 2018? Jessica Colon says we'll see.
We will heal from this, as you always do. You have inter-family skirmishes at Thanksgiving, and we have inter-family skirmishes at conventions. But what I know is Ted Cruz doesn't want Hillary Clinton as president. He said so this morning. He won't be voting for her.
A Pew poll found in April that only 34% of weekly Republican churchgoers supported Donald Trump. That number has skyrocketed. A July Pew poll found that 87% now support Trump. Lauren?
Cruz admits his non-committal conversation is partly because that Trump insulted his wife on the campaign trail. Now, I caught up with former Speaker of the House and former presidential candidate Newt Gingrich. He says, move on.
Mr. Speaker, do you think that this was a move that was by Ted Cruz that was done because of what was said to his wife? Was this vengeance?
That's baloney.
They hit Callista. Wouldn't you hit back?
I would hit back immediately, and we go on to the next topic.
So you don't think it's right?
I wouldn't stand around and whine about it months later. This is a team sport, and if you can't be on the team, you shouldn't pretend you're on the team.
Matt Schlapp, chairman of the American Conservative Union. Mercedes Schlapp is a Republican strategist. Yes, that's Schlapp and Schlapp, and they are married. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be here.
One thing that we're not talking about very much is Vice President Pence. Oh, who's that? Have you seen him around? What do you expect his role to be?
Actually, Vice President nominee Mike Pence came to the American Conservative Union event this week early on, was for his first debut, and I have to tell you, he really is inspirational, Reagan-esque in his approach. I think his speech was a home run. Unfortunately, it was overshadowed by Ted Cruz's performance last night.
Speaking of Ted Cruz's performance last night, it's nice to have that not playing in our ear.
It's better than booze coming from the convention floor.
Right, that's true. What you guys were there speaking ahead of Ted Cruz's speech to the Texas delegation. How did it play in the room?
Yeah, by coincidence, Mercy and I were the kind of the warm-up act, and they actually asked Ted Cruz to come down to speak to them. And it was one of the most raucous political moments I've seen. Those delegates were 80% for Ted Cruz, but they were upset. They felt like he had led them on, that they felt like he was going to be with Trump in the end, because the question now is Trump or Hillary Clinton. And boy, did they let it all hang out Texas style. I mean, there was nothing left unsaid.
There was one moment that an African-American woman stood up and said, "My family has supported you, Ted Cruz. We voted for you. We stood by you, and we want you to stand by us, the people." And it was such an emotional plea on her behalf. And you could sense the frustration. You can sense the fact that they felt a bit betrayed by Ted Cruz. So I think he's going to need to figure out a way to not only heal the Texas delegation, but also figure out a way how he can come to terms with a Trump nomination.
Well, let's move on to faith and to our Catholic faith that we often talk about when I have you on the program. You know, in politics, there is no Catholic vote anymore, but it still is important. You know, the statistics are overwhelming for Hillary Clinton. Do you think that the party platform reaches out to Catholics in a way that it hasn't in the past, and is it enough?
Yeah, I think actually Catholics and Christians, people of faith, at the moment today in America, it's not so much about those policy issues that we've always traditionally stood strong for. Marriage, the right to life, all these basic questions. It's now, can you as an American practice your faith without the government getting involved in that practice? And will the government define the practice of your faith as the four walls of a church or a house of worship? The Obama administration doesn't believe that your faith imbues your life in everything you do and everybody you interact with. They think it's an hour a week. That is a major question for people of faith in this election, and Hillary Clinton's on the wrong side.
All right, Mercedes Schlapp, Matt Schlapp, President of the American Conservative Union, thank you so much for joining us. Brian, that's all for now. Coming up, we'll hear from a former presidential contender, Dr. Ben Carson. Back to you.
Thank you, Lauren Ashburn at the Republican National Convention. And other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. The Archdiocese of St. Paul in Minneapolis publicly admits wrongdoing in its handling of abuse allegations against a former priest.
It is a humbling prayer. Today, I, as the leader of this Archdiocese, stand before you to say we failed in what we have done and in what we have failed to do.
As part of a legal agreement, Archbishop Bernard Hebdo will personally participate in restorative justice sessions. Prosecutors will now drop 6 criminal child endangerment charges against the Archdiocese. The church was accused of turning a blind eye to repeated misconduct by a priest who was convicted of molesting 2 boys. The French prosecutor who oversees terrorism investigations says the Nice attack had been plotted for months. Prosecutor Francois Molin says Mohamed Boulel has also had accomplices. 5 suspects are in custody facing preliminary terrorism charges. Boulel drove a large truck into a crowd of people, killing 84 and injuring scores of others before police killed him. Molin says information from Boulel's phone shows searches and photos indicating he'd been studying an attack since last year. Turkey's parliament endorses sweeping powers for that country's president, allowing him to expand a crackdown after last week's failed coup. Legislators pass a 3-month state of emergency across Turkey. The government says a U.S.-based Muslim cleric is behind the coup attempt. Turkey has embarked on a massive crackdown on the movement's followers, firing thousands from their government jobs and detaining thousands of others. The Vatican's Secretary of State voices concern over that situation in Turkey.
These are not good developments. This is a source of concern for everybody because, of course, the tension in the world are increasing. This is a source of concern for everybody, and we hope that the wisdom, humanity will prevail and will help people to look and to find the right solution.
EWTN's Alan Holdren caught up with Cardinal Parolin today after a farewell ceremony for a retiring archbishop. Coming up, the World Series champion Kansas City Royals earn an invitation to the White House. And we return to the Republican National Convention where Ted Cruz isn't alone in not endorsing the GOP nominee. Thanks for joining us this Thursday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. World anti-doping agencies call for the entire Russian Olympic team to be banned from next month's Summer Games in Rio. This as Russia loses a court appeal following accusations of a state-run doping scheme. Wyatt Goolsby is here with more. Wyatt?
Brian, it's likely that Russian participation in the Summer Olympics will be limited, if not all-out banned. The final decision will come from the International Olympic Committee, who will likely weigh in within the next few days.
A blow for Russian runners. 68 Russian track and field athletes who hope to overturn a ban on their participation in international sports are shot down today.
The Russian Olympic Committee is not entitled to nominate Russian track and field athletes for the Olympic Games unless they fulfill these specific criteria.
Russia is accused of state-sponsored doping and cover-ups since 2011. This aspiring Olympian says the ruling is frustrating. She says innocent athletes who have never doped are being punished. Doug Eldridge, a sports agent who represents several Team USA Olympic athletes, says performance-enhancing drugs have always been a concern, but he says Russia is unique.
Never before have we seen something that is truly statewide on a governmental level. The active engagement and facilitation of this by the Russian government. In that regard, this is truly historic.
Eldridge says athletes who trained for years without drugs are in a tough spot.
It really is damned if you do, damned if you don't. You know, if I complete clean, then there's a very good chance that I finished fourth. And if I dope, then I'm to try and gain first, second, or third, then I'm no worse than the same people that I hate.
6-time Olympic champion Usain Bolt says if the Russian athletes are banned from Rio, it would scare many athletes who are considering doping.
I always feel like it's a good message to show that, listen, if you cheat or if you go against the rules, then we're going to take serious action.
The Russian sports minister denies accusations that he and his government colleagues are involved in doping. He says this is all a lobbying attempt to ban Russia from the Olympics. He says Russia will conduct its own investigation in response to the reports. Brian.
Thank you, Wyatt Goolsby. The World Series champion Kansas City Royals get the royal treatment today at the White House. They took the 2015 World Series from the New York Mets. Royals manager Ned Yost and two players interrupted Press Secretary Josh Earnest's media briefing today. They presented Ernest, a Royals fan from Kansas City, his own personalized jersey. Border security is one of the issues surfacing again this week at the Republican National Convention. Political Director Lauren Ashburn continues our team coverage from Cleveland. Lauren?
Brian, one person who has been a loyal Trump surrogate is Dr. Ben Carson. He was one of the 16 vanquished candidates who ran against him. I asked Dr. Carson why Catholics should vote for Donald Trump.
Because he is a man who actually believes in the founding principles of this country, the Judeo-Christian principles of this country. Believe it or not, he is a man who actually prays and is willing to talk about this. And I think they're moving very much in the correct direction. They certainly are not, as some of the secular progressives are, hostile to faith.
So you made a comment on Tuesday night, I believe it was, questioning whether or not we're willing to vote for Hillary Clinton, who has as her role model someone who acknowledges Lucifer. Why did you feel like you needed to say that and to invoke Lucifer, the name Lucifer?
Because I knew it would cause the left wing to go absolutely berserk.
Bonkers, and it didn't work.
And as a result of that, a lot of people would start looking up Saul Alinsky. And then they would actually read about who this guy is, and you get to see who has been a person who influenced Hillary Clinton.
We'll have more of our discussion with Dr. Ben Carson tomorrow. Joining us now is Nebraska Representative Jeff Fortenberry. Thank you. Welcome to the program.
Good evening. Good to see you.
You too. As a Catholic yourself, how should Catholics approach this election?
Catholics, Christians, people of goodwill should approach every election with the utmost seriousness. We are a people in America who self-governs. That means we've been given the extraordinary responsibility of providing the input and loaning the power to those who we put in authority over us. There's no washing our hands, no walking away from it. Yes, it's messy, it's difficult, and it's imperfect, but we've got to engage.
Ted Cruz said last night, vote your conscience. Up until, a week ago or not that long ago, you were not on the Trump train. Why, and why are you now?
I was a very strong supporter of Carly Fiorina through the primary. I thought Carly was very clear. I deeply respected her principles. I thought she had an extraordinary background. It was a very tough primary. She was insulted by Donald Trump, and I'm not sure that fence is totally mended. Yet at the same time, at this point, you have to look at two candidates, and I'm not going to do anything that would support Hillary Clinton, who has a very different philosophical perspective on how to govern. And so I think at this point, my vote goes to Donald Trump.
Unlike Ted Cruz's, who is not going to go to Donald Trump, or actually we don't know about that. You know, when it comes to voting your conscience, what do you think he was talking about there? If you vote your conscience and you're a Republican, then you vote for your nominee.
Well, it's a little more complicated for those in public office, and I'll tell you why. When I sign up as a Republican to run for office, I'm not committing myself necessarily in writing to a particular platform, to a carrying forth an agenda that somebody else set. I vote according to my own judgment, to my own reason, to my own conscience. Now, that generally aligns me with the Republican Party ideals, but I always reserve the right to be independent and to vote my conscience.
Are you worried about retribution if Donald Trump is president?
Against me or Cruz?
Yeah, well, I think Cruz has to be careful.
I have to live with my own conscience. I have to put my head on the pillow at night myself and live with what I've said and what I believe. Again, I incline generally to Republican Party principles about keeping the nation safe, about trying to create opportunity for everyone in society that can flourish, so that society can flourish. And I also believe in something called social conservation. And this is the great ideals of our tradition that uphold family life and faith life and civic life as really the grounding force for America to be successful in of itself. I think my party generally reflects those views, and this is why I lean this way. But again, I vote individually. I represent the people who have sent me here, and I owe them my best possible judgment.
Thank you so much. From Nebraska, Representative Jeff Fortenberry.
Nice to see you. Thank you.
Up next, how people are bridging ethnic divides to restore ancient places of worship. And a special gift, why Pope Francis appears in this couple's wedding photos. Thank you for joining us on this Thursday evening for EWTN News Nightly. I'm Brian Patrick. Ancient churches, mosques, and other monuments on the ethnically divided island of Cyprus are now being restored. A group of Greek and Turkish Cypriot volunteers is working to protect the island's cultural heritage, much of it in ruins. Work on several of 40 monuments identified as being in urgent need of repair has helped to break down walls of mistrust.
For us, these monuments should not be the monuments of the other ethnic group anymore. They are our common heritage, which should be protected and preserved for the future generations of Turkish Cypriots, Greek Cypriots, Maronites, Armenians, and Latins.
Cyprus has been divided since the mid-1970s when Turkey invaded after a coup by supporters of union with Greece. Most of the funding for this committee's work comes from the European Union. The Pope, who rarely presides at weddings, makes a special exception. A young, deaf Italian couple received the sacrament of matrimony from Pope Francis in the Santa Marta Chapel earlier this month. The bride is the daughter of a Vatican employee. Both served the Padua chapter of the Deaf Youth Committee of Italy. This was the first wedding for Pope Francis in the chapel at Casa Santa Marta, where he lives. And now on EWTN News Nightly, we return to political director Lauren Ashburn at the Republican National Convention in Cleveland. Lauren?
Where it is very loud here. There's been a lot of buzz, Brian, about Ted Cruz, but the spotlight will be on Donald Trump as he closes out the convention tonight. Tim Carney is senior political columnist for the Washington Examiner. Melinda Henneberger is editor-in-chief of Roll Call. Melinda, what does Donald Trump need to do tonight to knock it out of the park?
Well, the theme of today is making America one again, so I think it'll be interesting to see whether he continues in the vein of his campaign so far with rhetoric that's pretty hot and divisive, or whether he does try to calm it down and bring everybody together. If he does the latter, I'm afraid maybe his supporters won't recognize him.
Don't you think he's going to bring up Lion Ted all over again?
It would not be in Donald Trump's character to shrug off an assault like that and attack Ted Cruz not endorsing him last night. But also, what he wants to do tonight is look presidential, and one way to do it would be to stand up and be the better man. And one thing about Donald Trump, he's the least predictable politician I've ever covered.
I know. I yelled out a question out to him today. What are you going to say? And he goes, I love Cleveland. I was like, you didn't even hear me. But anyway, what do you think Ted's future is, Melinda? Did he commit political suicide?
I know that that's the conventional wisdom today, but I really don't believe that. I think that in the long run, his party, if it survives, contrary to what George W. Bush is worrying, that he may be the last Republican president in history, I think Republicans may come to see what Ted Cruz did as quite principled, even if there was also some personal score settling involved.
All right, let's move on. DNC, what are you expecting?
It will be a lot more tightly choreographed than this, in part because Hillary Clinton, the Democrats are always a little more scripted. Hillary Clinton is is really into micromanaging and getting the details down. And Donald Trump, I mean, this was in some ways a rookie production, what went on stage here. So it'll be a lot more, it'll be a lot more focused. It'll be a lot more politicians giving seasoned messages. It'll be a lot more boring for a political reporter. I'll say that.
Melinda, you get the last word. Your take?
I think that it's going to be a celebration of the first female nominee of a major party. I think that will be a major focus next week.
Okay, thank you so much, Melinda Henneberger, editor-in-chief of Roll Call, and Tim Carney, Washington Examiner.
Thanks.
We will be up all night following Donald Trump's speech and other surprises that may pop up along the way, and we'll have full coverage tomorrow on our show. And for our Republican National Convention special, which will air immediately after our show tomorrow. Brian, back to you.
Thank you, Lauren, and the entire team there in Cleveland. For our EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. We'll have more from Cleveland tomorrow, and of course, next week, you can follow our coverage of the Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia. Good night. God bless.